That evening, I came home earlier than usual. As soon as I opened the door, I was greeted by the sound of loud sobbing echoing through the house. Dropping my bag on the floor, I rushed to the living room, my heart pounding with anxiety. There, on the couch, sat Melissa, crying uncontrollably, tears streaming down her face. "Melissa, what's wrong? Are you okay?" I asked, my voice filled with concern. She just cried harder, her shoulders shaking with each sob. After a few moments of silence, she finally managed to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've done something terrible, Jack." My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to stay calm, though panic was rising inside me. "I cheated on you," she said, looking straight into my eyes. The words hit me like a freight train, and for a moment, I felt like the ground was slipping away beneath me. There was a deafening silence between us. I couldn't find any words. My mind was racing, but all I could think was, how could she? "With who?" I finally managed to ask, my voice trembling with anger. "Michael," she replied, and it felt like my heart shattered into a million pieces. Michael was a close friend of ours, someone I trusted implicitly. She continued to speak, her voice filled with regret and sorrow, explaining how it happened. "It was after the Halloween party," she began, her voice barely audible. "You were away on that business trip to Chicago. We had all been drinking, celebrating. I didn't plan for it to happen, Jack, I swear. Michael and I were the last ones awake. We were sitting on the porch talking. One thing led to another, and I don't know how it happened, but we kissed. And then—" She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. The image of them together, in our house while I was away, burned in my mind. Every word she said felt like a knife twisting deeper into my heart. "I don't know what came over me," she continued, her voice trembling. "It was a moment of weakness, a terrible mistake. I've regretted it every single day since." Melissa kept crying, pleading for my forgiveness, but her words only intensified my pain. I remembered all the times I had trusted her and believed in our unbreakable bond, and now it was all in ruins. "I need to leave," I said, standing up from the couch. I couldn't bear to be in the same house with someone who had betrayed me so deeply. I walked to our bedroom and began packing my things, ignoring her desperate pleas and apologies. The act of packing was mechanical, my mind numb from the shock. As I left the house, a mix of devastation and liberation washed over me. Sitting in my car, I realized my life had just been turned upside down. I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. Trust, once broken, could never be fully restored. I drove aimlessly for what felt like hours, my mind replaying the events of the evening over and over. How could Melissa, the woman I loved and trusted, betray me with our close friend Michael? The pain was unbearable, a constant gnawing ache in my chest. Eventually, I found myself parked outside a small, dimly lit bar on the outskirts of town. I needed something to numb the pain, to drown out the chaos in my head. I walked in, sat at the bar, and ordered a drink. The bartender, an older man with kind eyes, gave me a sympathetic look but didn't ask any questions. I was grateful for the silence. As I sipped my drink, I couldn't help but think back to that Halloween party. It had been such a fun night, or so I thought. Melissa had been dressed as a witch, complete with a pointy hat and a mischievous smile. Michael had come as a pirate, complete with a fake parrot on his shoulder. We all laughed, danced, and enjoyed each other's company. How could everything have gone so wrong? I remember the phone call I had made to Melissa that night from my hotel room in Chicago. She had sounded so happy, so carefree. "I miss you, Jack," she had said. "I can't wait for you to come home." Little did I know what was happening behind my back. I finished my drink and ordered another. The alcohol was starting to take effect, dulling the edges of my pain but not erasing it completely. My thoughts turned to Michael. How could he do this to me? We had been friends for years and shared countless memories. He knew how much I loved Melissa. The betrayal cut deep. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. I needed answers. I needed to confront him, to hear his side of the story. I paid for my drinks and left the bar, my mind made up. I drove to Michael's apartment, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. When I arrived, I pounded on his door, my heart racing with anger and adrenaline. It took a few minutes, but eventually, Michael opened the door, looking surprised to see me. "Jack, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice filled with genuine confusion. "We need to talk," I said, pushing past him into the apartment. "About Melissa. About what you did." Michael's face paled, and he closed the door, motioning for me to sit down. I refused, standing with my arms crossed, glaring at him. "I'm so sorry, Jack," he began, his voice shaky. "It was a mistake, a moment of weakness. I never meant to hurt you." "A mistake?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You slept with my wife, Michael. How could you do that to me? To us?" He looked down, unable to meet my eyes. "I don't know. I was drunk, and we both were. It just happened, and I hate myself for it." His words did little to calm my anger. "Do you even realize what you've done? You've destroyed everything. Our friendship, my marriage. How am I supposed to move on from this?" Michael finally looked up, tears in his eyes. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, Jack, but I'm truly sorry. If I could take it back, I would." I stood there, feeling a mix of rage and sorrow. Part of me wanted to punch him, to make him feel the pain he had caused. But another part of me felt a deep, aching sadness. We had been friends for so long, and now everything was ruined. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you," I said finally, my voice breaking. "But I needed to hear it from you." With that, I turned and left the apartment, my emotions in turmoil. As I drove away, I realized that this was just the beginning. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with pain and difficult decisions. But one thing was clear: my life would never be the same again. The next morning, I woke up in a motel room, the events of the previous night crashing back into my mind with a sickening force. I had barely slept, my thoughts a tangled mess of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak. As I lay there staring at the ceiling, I knew I couldn't avoid Melissa forever. We needed to talk, to figure out what came next, no matter how painful it might be. Reluctantly, I got dressed and made my way back home. The house felt different now, colder and emptier, despite everything being exactly where I had left it. I walked into the living room, half expecting to see Melissa still crying on the couch, but instead, I found her sitting quietly, her eyes red and puffy from a night of tears. Sitting beside her was her sister Rachel, who had flown in from Florida as soon as she heard the news. Rachel looked up as I entered, her expression a mix of sympathy and worry. "Jack," she said softly, "Melissa told me everything." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Melissa looked at me, her eyes filled with guilt and sorrow. "Jack, I don't even know where to start," she began, her voice trembling. "I'm so sorry. I know sorry isn't enough, but I need you to know how much I regret what happened." Rachel reached out and took Melissa's hand, offering silent support. I could see how much Melissa was struggling, but it did little to ease my own pain. "We need to talk," I said finally, my voice strained. "But first, I need to know why. Why did this happen, Melissa? What were you thinking?" She took a deep breath, tears welling up in her eyes again. "I don't have a good answer, Jack. It was a moment of weakness. I was feeling lonely with you being away so much. And Michael, he was there. We were both drunk and things just spiraled out of control. It's not an excuse, but that's the truth." Her words hung in the air, heavy and painful. I glanced at Rachel, who was watching us with a concerned expression. "Jack, I know this is incredibly hard," Rachel said gently. "But Melissa is truly sorry. She's been beating herself up over this ever since it happened." I rubbed my temples, trying to process everything. "Rachel, I appreciate you being here for Melissa, but this is something we need to figure out on our own." Rachel nodded, standing up. "I'll give you both some space. I'll be in the guest room if you need me." As Rachel left the room, Melissa and I sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our situation pressing down on us. "Do you still love him?" I asked quietly, dreading the answer. "No," she replied immediately. "I never loved him. It was a terrible mistake, Jack. You're the only one I love." Her words brought a flicker of hope, but the pain was still too fresh. "I don't know if I can get past this, Melissa. Trust is everything to me, and you broke that." "I know," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make it right. I don't want to lose you, Jack." I stood up, feeling overwhelmed. "I need some time to think. This isn't something that can be fixed overnight." Melissa nodded, understanding. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here waiting for you." As I walked out of the house, I felt a mixture of relief and despair. The road to healing was going to be long and difficult, but at least now, there was a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to rebuild what had been broken. But for now, I needed space to figure out my next steps and to come to terms with the enormity of what had happened. The following evening, I found myself sitting in my car outside our house, the engine idling as I gathered the courage to face Melissa again. The day had been a blur, my thoughts consumed by the betrayal and the uncertain future that lay ahead. I took a deep breath and turned off the engine. It was time to confront Melissa and try to make sense of our shattered lives. As I walked into the house, the quiet was almost deafening. Melissa was sitting at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea, staring into the distance. She looked up as I entered, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and apprehension. "Jack," she said softly, standing up. "I'm glad you're here. We need to talk." I nodded, pulling out a chair and sitting down across from her. The silence between us was heavy, filled with unspoken words and unresolved pain. "I've been thinking a lot," I began, my voice steady but strained. "About us, about what happened, and about where we go from here." Melissa looked down at her hands, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her mug. "I know I hurt you deeply, Jack, and I know that saying I'm sorry isn't enough. But I need you to know that I regret it more than anything. I love you, and I want to do whatever it takes to make things right." I studied her face, searching for sincerity. The pain in her eyes was real, and it mirrored my own. "Melissa, I need to understand why. You said you were lonely, that we were spending too much time apart, but why Michael? Why someone we both trusted?" She took a deep breath, struggling to find the right words. "Michael was always there, Jack. He was our friend, someone I thought I could trust. That night, after the party, we were both feeling vulnerable. We had been drinking and it just happened. I wasn't thinking clearly. It was a mistake, a terrible lapse in judgment, but it meant nothing to me. You're the one I love, the one I want to be with." Her words cut through me, a painful reminder of the fragility of trust. "It's hard to believe that, Melissa. Seeing you with someone else, knowing what happened, it's like a knife in my heart." Tears welled up in her eyes again. "I know, and I can't imagine how much it hurts. But I want to try and fix this, Jack. I want to go to therapy, to work on our relationship. I don't want to lose you." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "Therapy might be a good idea. We need help if we're going to get through this, but it's not just about fixing what's broken. It's about rebuilding trust, and that's going to take time." Melissa nodded, a flicker of hope in her eyes. "I'll do whatever it takes, Jack. I know it won't be easy, but I'm willing to put in the work. I love you, and I believe we can get through this." The weight of her words settled over me. Part of me wanted to believe her, to hope that we could mend the pieces of our broken relationship, but another part of me was still raw with pain, struggling to see a path forward. "We'll take it one step at a time," I said finally. "We'll go to therapy, we'll talk, and we'll see where that takes us. But you need to understand, Melissa, that this won't be easy. It will take time, patience, and a lot of effort from both of us." She reached across the table, taking my hand in hers. "I understand, Jack, and I'm ready to do whatever it takes. I just want us to find our way back to each other." As I looked into her eyes, I saw the genuine remorse and determination there. It wouldn't be easy, and the road ahead would be filled with challenges. But for the first time since discovering the betrayal, I felt a small glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to heal and rebuild what had been broken. A few days had passed since Melissa and I had our heart-to-heart conversation. We agreed to start couples therapy, and were scheduled for our first session the following week. In the meantime, the atmosphere at home was tense, but cautiously hopeful. Melissa was making an effort to be transparent, and I was trying to keep an open mind, though the pain of betrayal still lingered. One evening, as I was sitting on the back porch, staring at the fading sunset, Rachel came out to join me. She carried 2 mugs of coffee and handed me one before sitting down on the bench next to me. "Mind if I join you?" she asked, her voice gentle. "Not at all," I replied, taking a sip of the coffee. "Thanks for the coffee." Rachel nodded, looking out at the yard. "It's beautiful out here, peaceful." "Yeah," I said, appreciating the tranquility for a moment. It's one of the reasons we bought this place. Rachel sighed, turning her gaze towards me. Jack, I know you're going through a lot right now. I wanted to talk to you if that's okay. I glanced at her, seeing the concern in her eyes. Sure, Rachel. What's on your mind? I wanted to apologize for Melissa, she began, her voice filled with sincerity. I know she's the one who needs to make things right, but as her sister, I feel responsible in some way. I know how much you love her, and seeing you both like this breaks my heart. I shook my head. You don't need to apologize for her, Rachel. This is something she did, not you. But I appreciate your concern. It means a lot. Rachel took a deep breath. Jack, Melissa has always looked up to you. She loves you more than anything. This mistake she made, it's not who she is. I know that doesn't change what happened, but I want you to know that she's genuinely remorseful. I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. I know she's sorry, Rachel. I can see it in her eyes. But it's hard to get past the fact that she betrayed me with someone I considered a friend. I understand, Rachel said softly. And you have every right to feel that way. Betrayal cuts deep. But I believe in second chances. I've seen couples go through worse and come out stronger on the other side. It's going to take time and a lot of effort, but I believe you two can make it. I looked at her, searching for reassurance. Do you really think so? She nodded firmly. I do. Melissa is willing to do whatever it takes to fix this. And from what I know about you, Jack, you're not someone who gives up easily. If you both commit to this, there's hope. We sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of her words sinking in. Rachel had always been a voice of reason, someone who saw things clearly and honestly. Thank you, Rachel, I said finally. Your support means a lot. It's comforting to know that someone else believes in us, even when I'm struggling to. She smiled, her eyes softening. You're a good man, Jack, and Melissa is lucky to have you. Just take it one day at a time, and remember, it's okay to lean on others for support. You don't have to go through this alone. I nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. Thanks, Rachel. I'll keep that in mind. As the evening turned into night, Rachel and I continued to talk, sharing stories and memories. It was a small respite from the storm that had engulfed my life, a reminder that despite the pain, there were still connections worth holding on to. For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope, not just for my relationship with Melissa, but for the future. It would be a long and difficult journey, but with the support of those who cared about us, maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. The day of our first therapy session arrived with a mix of anticipation and dread. Melissa and I had been navigating the fragile truce in our home, each trying to rebuild a semblance of normalcy. The idea of confronting our issues with a stranger felt daunting but necessary. We needed help to untangle the mess we found ourselves in. The therapist's office was a cozy, welcoming space. Soft lighting, comfortable chairs, and shelves lined with books and plants created an atmosphere that was surprisingly calming. Melissa and I sat side by side on a small couch, our hands resting awkwardly on our laps. Dr. Elaine Roberts, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a calm demeanor, introduced herself and explained how the sessions would work. Her presence was reassuring, and I felt a glimmer of hope that this might actually help. Jack, Melissa, thank you for coming today, Dr. Roberts began. I know this isn't easy, but you're taking an important step toward healing. Today, I'd like to hear from both of you about what happened and how you're feeling. This will help me understand where you are and how we can move forward. Melissa took a deep breath, her voice trembling as she spoke. I know I've hurt Jack deeply. I made a terrible mistake, and I regret it every single day. I want to make things right, to rebuild the trust I've broken. I glanced at her, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. It was still hard to reconcile the woman I loved with the one who had betrayed me, but I was willing to try. Melissa's right, I said, my voice steady. This has been incredibly painful. I trusted her completely, and finding out about the affair has shaken me to my core. I don't know how to move past it, but I want to try. Dr. Roberts nodded, her expression empathetic. Thank you both for your honesty. It's clear that you both care deeply about each other and want to find a way forward. Trust is a fundamental part of any relationship, and rebuilding it after a betrayal is challenging, but not impossible. Let's start by exploring what led to this situation. Melissa looked down, her fingers nervously twisting her wedding ring. I felt lonely and disconnected, especially with Jack being away so much for work. Michael was there, and in a moment of weakness, I made a horrible mistake. It wasn't about love or wanting to hurt Jack. It was a moment of vulnerability that spiraled out of control. Dr. Roberts turned to me. "Jack, how did you feel when you found out about the affair?" I took a deep breath, the memory still raw. I felt like my world had shattered. Melissa and I had built a life together, and I trusted her more than anyone. Knowing that she betrayed that trust with someone I considered a friend was devastating. It made me question everything. "Your feelings are completely valid, Jack," Dr. Roberts said gently. "It's normal to feel hurt, angry, and confused. The key to moving forward is open communication and understanding. Melissa, what can you do to help rebuild Jack's trust?" "I want to be completely transparent," Melissa said, her voice filled with determination. "No more secrets, no more lies. I'll answer any questions Jack has, and I'll do whatever it takes to show him that I'm committed to our relationship." Dr. Roberts nodded. "Transparency is crucial. It's important for both of you to feel safe and understood. Jack, what do you need from Melissa to start rebuilding trust?" I thought for a moment. I need to see consistent effort from her. I need to feel like she's truly committed to making this work. And I need time. This isn't something that can be fixed overnight. "Oh, that's a reasonable request," Dr. Roberts said. "Rebuilding trust is a process that takes time and effort from both parties. It's important to be patient and compassionate with each other." The session continued with Dr. Roberts guiding us through exercises designed to improve communication and foster understanding. By the end of the hour, I felt a mixture of exhaustion and cautious optimism. It was clear that the road ahead would be long and challenging, but for the first time since discovering the affair, I felt like we were taking steps in the right direction. As we left the therapist's office, Melissa reached out and took my hand. I hesitated for a moment before giving it a gentle squeeze. We walked to the car in silence, but the weight of unspoken words felt lighter. "Thank you for coming with me," Melissa said quietly as we got into the car. I nodded. "It's a start. We have a long way to go, but I'm willing to try." As we drove home, I realized that while the pain of betrayal still lingered, there was a glimmer of hope on the horizon. With time, effort, and the support of therapy, maybe we could find a way to heal and rebuild our life together. A few weeks had passed since our first therapy session, and Melissa and I were slowly starting to rebuild our relationship. The sessions with Dr. Roberts were helping us communicate more openly, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like we were making progress. However, the road to healing was far from smooth, and there were still moments of doubt and pain. One Saturday afternoon, I decided to go for a walk to clear my head. The weather was warm, with a gentle breeze rustling the leaves on the trees. I wandered aimlessly through the neighborhood, my thoughts drifting back to everything that had happened. Despite the progress we were making, the memory of the betrayal still haunted me. As I turned a corner, I saw Michael walking toward me. My heart skipped a beat, and I felt a surge of anger and resentment. We hadn't spoken since that night at his apartment, and seeing him now brought all those feelings rushing back. "Jack," Michael said, stopping a few feet away from me. He looked uncomfortable, his eyes filled with remorse. "Can we talk?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. "I don't know if there's anything left to say, Michael." "Please," he said, his voice pleading. "I owe you an apology. I need to explain." Reluctantly, I nodded. "Fine, let's talk." We walked to a nearby park and found a quiet spot on a bench. The tension between us was palpable, but I was determined to hear him out. "Jack, I can't begin to tell you how sorry I am," Michael began, his voice trembling. "What I did was unforgivable, and I hate myself for it. I never meant to hurt you." I looked at him, the pain still fresh in my mind. "Then why did you do it, Michael? Why betray me like that?" He sighed, rubbing his temples. "I was going through a rough time. I felt lost and disconnected. Melissa and I had always been close, and that night, we were both drunk, and things got out of hand. It's not an excuse, but it's the truth. It was a moment of weakness, and I've regretted it every day since." I studied his face, searching for sincerity. "You know how much Melissa means to me. How could you risk everything for a moment of weakness?" Michael's eyes filled with tears. "I know, Jack, and I hate myself for it. I've lost your trust and your friendship, and I don't expect forgiveness. but I wanted you to know how deeply sorry I am." I took a deep breath, trying to process his words. "I'm trying to move forward, Michael. Melissa and I are working on our relationship, but it's hard. Your betrayal cut deep." "I understand," he said quietly. "And I don't expect you to forgive me. But if there's anything I can do to make amends, anything at all, please let me know." We sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of our broken friendship hanging between us. Despite everything, I could see that Michael was genuinely remorseful. It didn't erase the pain, but it did offer a small measure of closure. "Michael," I said finally, my voice steady, "I don't know if I can ever fully forgive you, but I appreciate your apology. I need time to heal, and maybe one day we can find a way to move past this." He nodded, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you, Jack. I hope one day we can rebuild our friendship, even if it takes time." As I walked away from the park, I felt a strange sense of relief. The conversation with Michael had been difficult, but it had also provided a measure of closure. The road to healing was still long, but with each step I felt a little more hopeful. Returning home, I found Melissa sitting on the porch, her eyes filled with concern. "Are you okay?" she asked, standing up as I approached. "I ran into Michael," I said, seeing the shock in her eyes. "We talked. It was hard, but I think it was something I needed to do." Melissa nodded, taking my hand. "How do you feel?" I sighed, looking out at the sunset. "I feel a little lighter. We have a long way to go, but I think we're moving in the right direction." She squeezed my hand, a small smile playing on her lips. "We'll get through this, Jack, together." As we stood there, hand in hand, I felt a glimmer of hope. The road to healing was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like we had a chance, and that was enough to keep me going. The weeks continued to pass, each day a small step forward in our journey of healing. Melissa and I had settled into a routine, attending therapy sessions, working on our communication, and trying to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. It wasn't easy, but we were making progress, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of hope. One crisp autumn morning, Melissa and I were sitting in the kitchen, enjoying a quiet breakfast. She had been feeling off for a few days, and despite my initial concerns, she assured me it was probably just a mild bug. But when she suddenly stood up, clutching her stomach and rushing to the bathroom, I knew something was wrong. "Melissa?" I called out, following her. "Are you okay?" She was pale, leaning over the sink. "I don't know, Jack. I've been feeling nauseous and tired lately. Maybe I should see a doctor." I nodded, worry gnawing at me. "Yeah, let's get you checked out. Better to be safe." Later that day, we sat in the waiting room of Dr. Jenkins's office, the tension between us palpable. Melissa fidgeted with her hands, her anxiety evident. When the nurse called her name, we stood up together and followed her into the examination room. Dr. Jenkins, a kind woman in her early 50s, greeted us warmly. "Melissa, Jack, what brings you in today?" Melissa explained her symptoms, and Dr. Jenkins listened attentively. "Let's run some tests to see what's going on," she said, guiding Melissa through a series of routine checks. After what felt like an eternity, Dr. Jenkins returned with a smile on her face. "Well, I have some news for you both. Melissa, you're pregnant." The words hung in the air, disbelief and joy washing over us in waves. Melissa's eyes filled with tears, and she reached for my hand, squeezing it tightly. "Pregnant?" I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. "Are you sure?" Dr. Jenkins nodded, her smile widening. "Yes, Jack. Congratulations. You're going to be parents." Melissa and I stared at each other, the enormity of the news sinking in. For years we had tried to have a baby, facing disappointment after disappointment. Melissa had undergone numerous treatments, and we had almost given up hope. But now, against all odds, we were finally going to have a child. As we left the doctor's office, the world seemed brighter and more vibrant. We walked in silence, both of us overwhelmed with emotion. When we reached the car, Melissa turned to me, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "Jack, I can't believe it," she said, her voice trembling. "We're going to have a baby." I pulled her into my arms, holding her tightly. "I know, Melissa. It's a miracle." The drive home was a blur of excitement and disbelief. We had so much to talk about and so many plans to make. When we finally pulled into the driveway, Melissa turned to me, her face radiant with happiness. I can't wait to tell Rachel, she said, her voice filled with excitement. She's going to be so happy for us. We hurried inside, and Melissa called Rachel, her voice bubbling with joy as she shared the news. Rachel's ecstatic screams echoed through the phone, and soon we were all laughing and crying together. That evening, as we sat on the porch, watching the sunset, I felt a sense of peace and contentment that I hadn't felt in a long time. Melissa rested her head on my shoulder, her hand gently caressing her stomach. I wonder if it's a boy or a girl, she mused, a soft smile playing on her lips. Either way, it's our miracle, I said, kissing her forehead. But I have a feeling it's a boy. Weeks turned into months, and our anticipation grew with each passing day. The ultrasound appointment finally arrived, and we sat in the dimly lit room, holding hands as the technician moved the wand over Melissa's belly. Would you like to know the gender? The technician asked, her eyes twinkling. We nodded eagerly and she smiled. Congratulations, you're having a boy. Tears of joy streamed down Melissa's face, and I felt my own eyes misting up. We were having a son. Our long-awaited miracle was becoming a reality. As we left the clinic, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. The journey we had been on was far from easy, but it had led us to this moment. Melissa and I had faced our darkest times and come out stronger, and now we had a future filled with hope and promise. That night, as we lay in bed, Melissa turned to me, her eyes filled with love. Jack, thank you for standing by me, for believing in us. I kissed her gently, my heart swelling with love and pride. Thank you, Melissa, for giving us this miracle. I can't wait to meet our son and start this new chapter together. As we drifted off to sleep, the weight of the past seemed to lift, replaced by the light of a new beginning. We had faced our trials, but now we were ready to embrace the future, hand in hand with our son on the way. With the news of our baby boy on the way, Melissa and I plunged into a whirlwind of preparation and anticipation. Our home became a hive of activity as we transformed spare rooms into a nursery fit for our son. It was a labor of love, filled with laughter, excitement, and a renewed sense of purpose. The first task was choosing a theme for the nursery. Melissa had always loved the idea of a woodland theme, with soft earth tones, woodland animals, and a touch of whimsy. We spent hours poring over paint swatches, debating crib designs, and imagining our son's first room. I think this shade of green would be perfect for the walls, Melissa said, holding up a paint sample to the light. I nodded, studying the color. It's calming. He'll love it. We spent weekends painting the nursery together, careful to create a soothing environment for our little one. Melissa's belly grew rounder with each passing week, a visible reminder of the life growing inside her. As the due date approached, we attended prenatal classes together, learning about childbirth, infant care, and parenting techniques. Melissa was diligent about her health, eating well, and staying active under the guidance of her doctor. We're almost there, she said one evening, rubbing her belly gently. I can't believe how fast it's gone. I kissed her forehead, feeling a surge of excitement and nerves. It won't be long now. Our son is almost here. Friends and family showered us with love and support, throwing us a baby shower filled with gifts, advice, and well wishes. The nursery was filled with tiny onesies, soft blankets, and books to read to our son. I can't wait to meet him, Rachel said, her eyes shining with excitement. He's going to be so loved. On the eve of Melissa's due date, we sat together on the porch, watching the stars twinkle overhead. The air was crisp with the promise of autumn, and a sense of peace settled over us. Our lives are about to change forever, Melissa said softly, leaning against me. I smiled, wrapping my arms around her. And I wouldn't have it any other way. We're ready for this, Melissa. We're going to be great parents. She nodded, her hand resting on her belly. I believe that too. The next morning we drove to the hospital, our bags packed and hearts full of anticipation. Melissa's contractions started later that afternoon, and we paced the hospital halls together, breathing through each wave of pain. Hours later, our son was born, a perfect bundle of joy with 10 tiny fingers and 10 tiny toes. Melissa held him close, tears of happiness streaming down her face. He's beautiful, I whispered, kissing her forehead. He's perfect, she replied, her voice filled with awe. As I held our son for the first time, a wave of love washed over me, deeper and stronger than anything I had ever known. Our journey had been filled with challenges and heartache, but in that moment, None of it mattered. We were a family, united by love and ready to embrace the future together. And as I looked into the eyes of our son, I knew that everything we had been through had led us to this perfect, precious moment. Our journey through betrayal, healing, and the miracle of new life had brought us to a place of profound gratitude and joy. As Melissa and I settled into parenthood, our days became a rhythm of feedings, diaper changes, and stolen moments of sleep. Every cry and every smile from our son reminded us of the love that had carried us through our darkest days. The nursery we had painstakingly prepared now echoed with the soft sounds of lullabies and the sweet scent of baby powder. Our home, once filled with tension and uncertainty, now overflowed with warmth and laughter. Rachel had become a frequent visitor, showering her nephew with affection and offering endless support to Melissa and me. Michael had reached out again, tentatively at first, but with a genuine desire to mend our friendship. We had started rebuilding trust, slowly but surely, as we navigated the complexities of forgiveness and reconciliation. Therapy sessions with Dr. Roberts had become less frequent, but no less valuable. We continued to work on our communication, ensuring that our relationship remained strong and resilient. The scars of betrayal had not disappeared completely, but they had faded into reminders of our strength and determination to overcome. As months turned into years, our son grew from a tiny infant into a curious toddler, exploring the world with boundless energy and wonder. Melissa and I watched with pride as he took his first steps, uttered his first words, and filled our lives with endless joy. Our marriage had been tested, but it had emerged stronger than ever. We had learned the importance of honesty, forgiveness, and unconditional love. Our bond had deepened, enriched by the challenges we had faced together. One evening, as Melissa and I sat on the porch, watching our son chase fireflies in the yard, I took her hand in mine. "We've come a long way," I said, my voice filled with emotion. She smiled, squeezing my hand gently. "Yes, we have, and I wouldn't change a thing." I kissed her forehead, feeling a sense of peace settle over me. "Neither would I. Our journey has been difficult, but it's also been beautiful, and it's led us to this moment." As the sun set in the distance, casting a golden glow over our little corner of the world, I knew that we had found our happy ending. Our family was whole, our love was strong, and our hearts were full. Together, we had faced the storm and emerged stronger on the other side. And as we looked toward the future, hand in hand, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, with courage, grace, and a love that had proven itself resilient. Our story was not just about betrayal and forgiveness. It was a testament to the power of love, the strength of the human spirit, and the beauty of new beginnings. And as I watched our son laugh under the starlit sky, I knew that our journey was far from over. It was just beginning. This, I realized, was our happily ever after.